The camera's off, high low vision for those of you who don't know, but today we're going to talk about New York. In 1776, New York became a state. Mechanicville is the smallest city in New York State, but also Mechanicville has a lot of history behind it. Did you know Mechanicville had a tornado to rip through it and ripped it apart? Yes, a tornado ripped Mechanicville apart. And also, did you know New York gets tornadoes too? You might say, New York gets tornadoes? I never knew that. Yes, New York gets tornadoes. New York also gets bizarre weather. Sometimes we can get an earthquake. Do you know New York City sits on fault lines? Yes. Now, New York is a huge state. It ain't one of the biggest states, but it's a pretty good sized state. It's many different areas in New York. You got New York City, a huge city, which is very well popular. And you think of New York, you think of New York City, but that don't even make a quarter of the state. No, New York covers way more. You got New York against Ohio, New York against Vermont, New York against Pennsylvania, New York against Massachusetts. Did you know New York has tons of counties, tons of lakes, tons of cities? Albany is the capital of New York. New York Giants is one of the teams out of New York. Did you know potato chips were invented in Saratoga? That's why they call it the Saratoga chip. Yes, a chef was making fries and the person complained they were too thick. So then he made the potato very, very, very thin. And the person said he loved it. Could he have more? And other people tried it, and that's how the potato chip became. New York has the Adirondack Mountains that run through it, the Appalachian Mountains that run through it. Some people say the Adirondacks are part of the Appalachian. I have to do my research, so I won't say it for sure. But the Appalachian Mountains run across New York State. You got the Catskills, you got the hills of New York, you got the Tectonic hills. You got many different things. You got Lake George, an awesome vacation destination. Lake George has Fort William Henry, a piece of New York's history sitting there. And also you got Lake Placid. No, there are no gators in Lake Placid. Lake Placid is a beautiful place to visit. Has awesome ski resort. And also other great places in New York to visit. Steventown, the only town on earth. Yes, Steventown, the only town with the name Steventown on earth. It's a small rural town. People help each other there. It's a nice small community. The population has been growing lately because everybody's seeing how nice everybody is and how no crime is out there. But unfortunately, with people moving in, they're cutting down trees and it's sad. But make sure you check out Neo's Diner if you go to Steventown. It's awesome. Gardner's Ice Cream Shop. I highly recommend it. Or don't forget to check out the Steventown Library, an old rustic library with a wooden deck off the front. Then they go to Berlin School. Yes, Steventown School closed because it wasn't enough children to go. So they go to Berlin, the next town over. It's Berlin Mountain, but it's a town on Berlin Mountain. They call it Berlin. And Berlin School, the elementary school, has a bomb shelter in the basement because years ago it wasn't a school. They turned it into a school. And nowadays it looks like a college. The elementary school looks like a college, and I mean it. Now, back to subject. Did you know New York State is pretty big? Yes, New York is high in taxes. Yes, the cost of living is pretty high in New York. To own a home, it's hard to in New York because the cost is so high. And New York has four seasons. We got spring, summer, fall, winter. If you don't like the cold, do not come to New York during the cold. It can get cold up here, and it also can get very hot during the summer times. New York is a state with many potential, many forgotten relics of New York, like Pottersville, like the old water park that is abandoned that's out in Avon Park, a little theme park thing. And also in Columbia County, they have the abandoned theme park. Many abandoned airports. Did you know the airport in East Greenbush they made Golf Middle School on? Yes. Golf Middle School used to be an old airport years ago for small crop planes in East Greenbush, but they turned it into a school. Now, New York also, have you heard of the garbage plate? That's New York food. If you haven't heard of that, it's a mixture of different kinds of food. It ain't really garbage on a plate. It's a mixture of different kind of food mixed together on a plate, and they call it the garbage plate. Also, did you know New York? Halsey spent a little bit of her time, and that's when she got known. She was living in New York when she got known with her music. She met in New York City at a record label place, And the next day, she jetted off to Los Angeles, California. Now, New York has many other things too, like you got Crooked Lake, Glass Lake, Crystal Lake, you got Lake Cherry Plains, you got Grafton. There are over 600 lakes in Ventura County alone. Columbia County has 40-some lakes. We have a lot of lakes in our state and a lot of mountains. A lot of rural, small towns, too. Canton, New York, that's a rural, small town. Matter of fact, they don't even have a store out there. Their gas station out in Canton goes by credit cards because it's so slow they don't have an employee. Austerlitz is another great community. Wynantskill, New York, Snyder's Lake, awesome lake, a small lake with many history behind that lake too. And people say that lake's haunted, but I beg to differ. I used to live in Snyder's Lake area and it was an awesome area. I missed Snyder's Lake a lot. I moved around a lot as a child, so I know different parts of New York because I moved all over. I also lived in Mechanicville for a little while. I loved it out in Mechanicville. It's the smallest city in New York, yes. They have trailer parks in Mechanicville. Now, you got other things too. Like, for instance, you got the museum down in Albany. It sits right next to the Capitol, and it's pretty cool. It has a lot of stuff, the museum. It's awesome. Don't forget the Empire State Building. Don't forget the big dog that's on top of the building, the one building down in Albany. That's a big landmark. And don't forget the Hudson River is a very historical river. It used to help with trade and stuff, but unfortunately it's polluted. You can't go swimming in it anymore. It's a polluted. And lots of New York is affected PFOAs, unfortunately, right now. But not all the towns. A lot of towns have PFOA. The town I live in, PFOA was found in the water. But New York is a great town to visit. Just do your research if you want to move to New York. Make sure PFOA is not in the water where you're looking at moving. And make sure the crime rate is low. Yes, New York has high crime rate, very high. But some small rural communities actually don't have no crime. The town that I live in now, we don't even have a police department. We have to call a state police, and it can take them an hour or sometimes more to come out depending on what the situation is. Or if they're nearby, they can be here in 10-15 minutes if they're waiting down the road to do a traffic stop to pull over out of state or that came over the border speeding to get to Albany from Mass. But long story short, New York is a great state with lots of opportunity, a great vacation destination. Just do your research on where the crime-ridden areas are and don't ever go to where high crime is. Go where it's low crime. See you all in the next cool video, and bundle up before you come to New York if you come in the wintertime. It gets cold. See you all in the